Yeah, I'm getting to it. 1972 brought us enormous advances in technology. Along with Mr. Coffee, Pong, and unexpected electroshock therapy, came the Nikon Nikkormat EL. A solid brass weapon of a camera with a shutter speed noise that is hardwired into the pleasure centers of my brain. This camera is one hell of an overachiever. While it's missing some of the features of the Nikon F2, the pro camera that came out at the time, it has one advantage that would become a staple of cameras to this very day: aperture priority exposure. While Nikon was beaten to the punch by Pentax to have the first aperture exposure SLR, and we did have some shutter priority cameras such as the Canon A1, it still was very early on in the game. Anyway, the camera has some solid specs, but nothing super impressive. It has a max shutter of 1/1000th of a second, pretty good even to this very day. It takes non-AI Nikon lenses, mirror lockup, so you can put the ultra-wide, ultra-pricey 6mm lens on this camera, and the 8mm, and a super hidden lock function. Microcontrollers came standard with this f2 lens, and the camera came in silver or glorious black. You can still get fresh batteries for this camera to this very day, no mercury mining required, and you can often pick up one of these cameras for cheap, as many people don't realize that the battery compartment is stored in the bottom of the mirror box. Wise thinking there, Nikon. And you'll often read online that the camera drains batteries. This doesn't seem to bother me so much, but I never use the camera in super long shooting sessions. Now, that's pretty positive. So why am I getting rid of this camera? I'm not. This was the first camera somebody ever gave me. I was given it as a teenager, and I have had it ever since. And I'm really happy with that, because this is a great camera to learn with. And for many years, this was the only camera I had. And that's still a pretty good situation to be in. Nikons are known often for their reliability, and this one has been very reliable to me. However, you can read up that sometimes they're not. The capacitors can go in them, unfortunately. But for me, this was pretty much the perfect first camera. Plenty of room to grow, simple enough to use if you had no idea what you were doing. And having one of these with just the 50mm lens forced me to learn how to use it before I got overwhelmed by trying to understand all of the other more advanced features that were available. So if I'm not selling it, why is it on my list? Well, if it wasn't my first camera and I didn't have such an unhealthy relationship with it, I can see how others might be able to find fault with it. I think if I'd been given an EL2 instead of the standard EL, I would have become obsessed with Nikon cameras from that point and demanded to have a FM2, an FM3A, and an F3 for the full barrage of Nikon brilliant heavy-duty cameras. Finally, the camera can be a little bit heavy for some. Now, I'm in love with the fact that this thing is made out of solid brass and can pulverize lesser cameras into dirt, but I could see if you want to go on a hike, you might not be able to take the full arsenal of cameras that you would like to, and so it might not be ideal for those situations. I just wanted to jump in with an example or two of photos that I've taken with this camera, and even with a single 50mm lens, you can get really creative. In many ways, this is a non-episode of this show, but I can say, for anyone getting into film photography, this camera should not be dismissed. A little like the f801 that I previously talked about, this camera is underappreciated, and many people don't consider it when they're looking at starter cameras. It's certainly not on a lot of people's top 10 lists. It is incredibly cheap for what it is. In my experience, most of the time if people say it's dead, they just don't know where the battery compartment is. It costs a fraction of the hyped up FM2 and FM3A and gives you most of the advantages. Okay, well, maybe it's not very comparable to the FM3A, but to a lot of the classic Nikons, this one holds up as a particular delight.